Excuse me, I'd like a table for one, please.
The manager didn't even blink. He wrinkled his nose like something rotten just
stink.
walked through his door.
Back up. You're making my guests lose their appetite.
He waved his hand in front of his face and stepped
You look
closer.
like you crawled out of a dumpster. Homeless trash like you doesn't get to sit where real people eat. Get your filthy self out of here before I drag you out myself.
A woman nearby pinched her nose, laughing. A kid at the next table pointed his phone straight at her face, recording. The bartender shook his head and looked away. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke up. She stood there, alone against an entire room. But what nobody in that restaurant knew was that before that night was over, every single one of them would wish they could take it all back. To understand what happened that night, we need to go back to the beginning. Not to the restaurant, to the woman. Her name was Helena Norton. She woke up every morning at 5:30, not because she had to, because 22 years of grinding had wired her body that way. Her eyes opened before her alarm ever went off. Her house sat on a quiet street in Decatur, Georgia. 3 bedrooms, brick walls, a magnolia tree in the front yard. She bought it 20 years ago when she could barely make the down payment. She could afford a mansion now. She never moved. Every morning was the same.
You got
Coffee first, a simple pour-over with a ceramic filter. She liked the ritual, the slow pour, the steam curling in the early light, the smell of dark roast filling her kitchen. She sat at her table in a faded Georgia State t-shirt, reading business news on her tablet. Then she checked messages from Oliver Preston, her chief operating officer. Inventory reports, staffing updates, revenue numbers from 32 locations, 32 restaurants, all hers. Helena grew up the youngest of 6 in rural Telfair County, Georgia. Her mother cleaned motel rooms, 12 a day, hands cracked raw by Friday. Her father drove long-haul trucks until 2 herniated discs ended his career at 43. No money for college. Helena worked double shifts at a diner through high school, saved every tip in a shoebox under her bed. She earned a partial scholarship to Georgia State and worked through the rest, waiting tables, cleaning offices. After graduation, she started catering from her 1-bedroom apartment. A folding table and her mother's recipes, smothered pork chops, collard greens, sweet potato pie. 1 client became 10. 10 became 50. She opened her first restaurant in East Atlanta at 31 with $400 in savings. 22 years later, the Crestwood Dining Group operated 32 upscale casual restaurants across 4 states. Revenue last year, $180 million. She owned every share, no investors, no partners. But Helena didn't want anyone to know who she was. No photo on the company website, no interviews. She believed the food and the people should be the brand, not her face. So she did something most CEOs would never do. She visited her restaurants unannounced. Plain clothes, no makeup. She ordered from the regular menu and watched. She watched how staff treated the couple in suits versus the couple in jeans. She watched how they treated people who didn't look like they belonged. That was her test. Always. Because she knew what it felt like to be judged before you open your mouth. Which brings us to tonight. The Atlanta flagship had received 3 complaints in 2 months, all from black customers, all about the general manager, rude, dismissive, hostile. One complaint said he told a black couple they might be more comfortable somewhere else. Helena read each one twice. Then she called Oliver. "I'm going in tonight, don't tell anyone." Now let's talk about the man she was about to meet. Craig Dutton, 34, white, absolutely convinced he was the most important person in any room. He got the manager job 6 months ago, not because he earned it, but because a college buddy on the regional team pushed his name forward. Craig was good at one thing, performing. Polished emails, solid numbers, the right smile for the right people. But behind that mask was something uglier. With staff of color, he was cold, cruel, and careful. He berated a black dishwasher for looking slow. He told a Latina hostess her accent made the place sound cheap. He never put it in writing. Tonight was Friday, 7:15. The restaurant was packed. Warm light bounced off brick walls and brass fixtures. The open kitchen sizzled with butter and garlic. Jazz floated through the speakers. Among the staff was Denise Calloway, 22, black, 3 weeks on the job. She bussed tables and refilled water, trying to stay invisible. She had already seen enough to know Craig was in trouble. She kept her head down, but she noticed everything. The dining room hummed with conversation. The smell of seared steak drifted through the air. Everything whispered one message: "You've made it." Then, at 7:30, a woman in a rain jacket and sneakers walked through the front door. And nothing in this restaurant would ever be the same. The hostess saw her first. A young white woman with a blonde ponytail and a polite smile. She stood behind the wooden podium near the entrance, a tablet glowing in front of her. When Helena walked in, the hostess looked up and hesitated, just for a second. Her eyes moved from the rain jacket to the sneakers to the canvas tote bag, then back up. "Good evening, welcome to Crestwood. Do you have a reservation?" Helena shook her head. "No reservation. I was hoping you might have something available. A small table or a spot at the bar would be fine." The hostess glanced at her screen. Her finger scrolled through the list. "Let me check for you. We're pretty full tonight, but I think—" She never finished that sentence. A hand appeared on the edge of the podium. Thick fingers. A silver watch. Craig Dutton stepped in from the side and positioned himself directly between Helena and the hostess. He didn't look at the hostess. He looked at Helena. His eyes moved down, then up. Slowly, like he was inspecting something that had been dragged in by the rain. "I'll handle this," he said to the hostess. His voice was flat, dismissive. The hostess pulled her hand back from the tablet and stepped aside without a word. Craig crossed his arms. He tilted his chin up slightly. That small gesture people do when they want you to know they're above you. "We're fully booked tonight," he said. "Every table, every seat, no exceptions." Helena looked past him at the dining room. She could see at least 3 empty tables, 2 near the window, 1 by the bar. White tablecloths, candles flickering, empty chairs pulled out like they were waiting for someone. "It looks like there might be a few open." "I said we're full," Craig cut her off. His jaw tightened. "You might want to try somewhere else. Something more your speed." He let that last phrase hang in the air. His speed, her speed. The meaning was clear to everyone within earshot. The hostess looked down at her shoes. A couple sitting near the entrance exchanged a glance, but said nothing. Helena didn't move. Her voice stayed level, calm, almost soft. "I don't mind waiting. I've heard wonderful things about the food here. I'd love to try it." Something shifted in Craig's face. His nostrils flared. His lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't used to being told no. He wasn't used to people like her standing their ground in his space. And in his mind, this was his space. He took a step closer. Close enough that Helena could smell his cologne. Sharp, overpowering, like he had bathed in it. "Let me be real with you," he said, lowering his voice just enough to sound threatening. "This restaurant has standards, a dress code, a reputation. I can't seat someone who walks in off the street looking like she just crawled out of a cardboard box. You understand me?" Helena felt the heat of his breath. She didn't step back. She looked at him the way she looked at spreadsheets with bad numbers, with patience and with the quiet knowledge that corrections were coming. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," she said. Craig laughed. Not a real laugh. A short, sharp bark of a sound that bounced off the brick walls. "My supervisor? Sweetheart, I am the supervisor. I run this place. Nobody's coming to save you." He turned his head toward the dining room and raised his voice. He wanted an audience now. He wanted everyone to see him handle the situation, to see him protect the space from this woman who dared to walk through the door looking the way she did. "Ma'am, I already told you. This isn't a soup kitchen. This isn't a shelter. We don't serve homeless trash in this restaurant." The words hit the room like a slap. The jazz kept playing, but everything else stopped. A fork froze halfway to a mouth. A wine glass paused in midair. A child at a nearby table looked up from her coloring book. The bartender stopped polishing a glass and stared. Craig wasn't done. "Look at you. Dirty jacket, filthy shoes. You stink like you haven't showered in a week. My guests are trying to enjoy a meal and you're standing here stinking up my front door." He pointed toward the exit. His finger was rigid. His arm was straight, like he was giving a command to a dog. "Get out now, before I call the police and have them drag you out of here, because I promise you, they will." He pulled his phone from his pocket, held it up, made a show of unlocking the screen. His thumb hovered over the keypad, ready to dial. Helena stood perfectly still. She looked at his phone, then at his face. Then she turned and looked at the dining room. She looked at every single person in that room. The couple near the window. The woman had her hand over her mouth, not in shock, but to hide a smirk. The man next to her shook his head slightly, like Helena was the problem, like she should have known better. A group of 4 at a center table had their phones out. One of them was already recording. Another was typing something, probably a caption. Something clever, something that would get likes. 2 women at the bar leaned toward each other, whispering. One of them laughed softly behind her wine glass. The bartender wiped the same spot on the counter over and over, staring hard at his own hands. Not one person stood up. Not one person said, "Hey, that's enough." Not one person looked at Helena like she was a human being who deserved to be treated with basic respect. The entire room had made its decision. She was the outsider. She was the disruption. She was the woman who didn't belong. Helena absorbed all of it. Every look, every whisper, every turned shoulder. She filed it all away the way she had filed away every insult, every slight, every dismissal she had ever received in her life. Quietly, carefully, completely. Then she reached into her canvas tote bag. She pulled out a small leather notebook, dark brown, worn at the edges. She opened it to a blank page. She took a pen from the side pocket and wrote something down. Craig stared at her. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked slightly, just slightly. "Are you writing about me? Who do you think you are?" Helena didn't look up. She finished writing. She closed the notebook. She placed it back in her bag. Then she looked Craig directly in the eyes. "I think you should put your phone away," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady, not a threat, not a plea, a statement of fact. Craig's face twisted. Red crept up from his collar to his jawline. His grip tightened around his phone. "That's it," he said. He turned to the hostess. "Call the police, right now. Tell them we have a trespasser who's refusing to leave and harassing our guests." The hostess froze. Her eyes darted between Craig and Helena. Her fingers trembled over the tablet. "Now!" Craig barked. The hostess picked up the phone behind the podium. Her hand was shaking. She dialed. Helena heard the faint sound of ringing on the other end. She heard the hostess's voice, small and uncertain, saying something about a disturbance at the restaurant. Helena didn't move. She stood exactly where she had been standing since she walked in the door, feet shoulder-width apart, tote bag on her shoulder, hands at her sides. She looked like the calmest person in the room, because she was. The police arrived in under 10 minutes. 2 officers walked through the front door. The first was a white man in his early 40s, broad shoulders, buzz cut. His hand rested on his belt out of habit. His name tag read, Officer Briggs. The second was a black woman, younger, maybe late 20s. Her eyes were already scanning the room before she stepped inside. Her tag read, Officer Dawson. Craig saw them and straightened his vest. He smoothed his hair. He walked toward them with his hand extended like he was greeting guests at a cocktail party. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly. I really appreciate it." His voice had changed completely. Gone was the snarling, barking manager who had just called a woman homeless trash. In his place stood a concerned professional. Calm, reasonable, worried about the safety of his guests. "We have a situation here," Craig said. He lowered his voice to a confidential tone. "This woman walked in about 15 minutes ago. She's not a customer. She has no reservation. I asked her politely to leave, and she refused. She's been disturbing our guests and making people uncomfortable. Honestly, I think she might be mentally unstable." He leaned in closer to Officer Briggs. "Between you and me, I think she might be homeless. She smells. Her clothes are dirty. I just don't want anything to happen in here, you know?" Officer Briggs nodded slowly. He looked past Craig toward Helena, who was still standing near the hostess podium. She hadn't moved. Her hands were still at her sides. Her tote bag hung from her shoulder. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman standing quietly in a restaurant. The officers approached her. "Evening, ma'am," Officer Briggs said. His tone was neutral but firm. "We got a call about a disturbance. Can I see some identification, please?" Helena reached into her bag. She pulled out her wallet, opened it, and handed her driver's license to the officer. No hesitation, no argument. "There you go," she said. Officer Briggs looked at the license, looked at her, looked at the license again. "Ms. Norton, the manager says you've been asked to leave and you've refused. Is that correct?" "He asked me to leave because he didn't like the way I look," Helena said. Her voice was steady. "I came in and asked for a table. That's all I did." Officer Briggs glanced back at Craig, who was standing a few feet away with his arms crossed. Craig raised his eyebrows and made a small circular motion with his finger near his temple, the universal gesture for crazy. Officer Dawson saw it. Her jaw tightened. "Ma'am, can I ask what brings you here tonight?" Officer Dawson asked. Her voice was different from her partner's, softer, more careful. "I wanted to have dinner," Helena said. "That's it." Officer Dawson looked around the restaurant. She saw the empty tables. She saw the customers staring. She saw the phones still recording. She turned to her partner and spoke quietly. "There's nothing here. She hasn't done anything." Officer Briggs rubbed the back of his neck. He was in that uncomfortable space between procedure and common sense. The call said disturbance. The woman in front of him was the most composed person in the building. Craig sensed the hesitation. He wasn't going to let this slip away. He stepped forward, positioning himself shoulder to shoulder with Officer Briggs, like they were on the same team, like they were both dealing with a problem that needed to be handled. "Officers, with all due respect, she's trespassing. This is a private establishment. I've asked her to leave. She won't leave. That's trespassing. I want her removed." He said removed like he was talking about a stain on the carpet. Then he turned to the dining room. He raised his voice so every table could hear. "I apologize to all of my guests for this inconvenience. We're handling it. This will be taken care of shortly." A man at a center table nodded approvingly. A woman near the window muttered, "About time." Craig soaked it in. The audience was on his side. The room was validating him. And that validation made him bolder. He turned back to the officers and pointed at Helena. "Look at her. Just look. Does she look like she belongs in a place like this? Does she look like she can afford a glass of water here, let alone a meal? Come on. We all know what's happening." She walked in looking for trouble, looking for a reason to play victim. And I'm not going to let her ruin my guest's evening. Helena listened to every word. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She stood the way a person stands when they have been through worse and survived. Rooted, still, unbreakable. She spoke with the kind of clarity that comes from a lifetime of being underestimated. "I walked through a public entrance during business hours. I asked for a table. You refused to seat me. You called me homeless trash in front of your entire dining room. You insulted my appearance. You threatened to have me dragged out. And now you've called the police on me because I'm a black woman in a rain jacket who wanted to eat dinner." She paused. Let every word settle into the silence like stones dropped in still water. "Tell me, which part of that is trespassing?" The room was dead silent. The jazz playlist had cycled to a slow trumpet piece. It felt like even the music was holding its breath. Craig's face went red, darker this time. The vein on the side of his neck pulsed visibly beneath the warm pendant lights. His nostrils flared. His fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't used to being challenged. Not here. Not in his restaurant. Not by someone who looked like her. "I don't care what you call it," he hissed through his teeth. "This is my restaurant, my rules. I decide who eats here and who doesn't. And I've decided that you don't. So either you walk out that door on your own 2 feet, or these officers carry you out. Your choice." He turned to Officer Briggs, squared his shoulders, stared him down. "Are you going to do your job or not?" Officer Briggs shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked at Helena. He looked at Craig. He looked at his partner. Officer Dawson gave him a look that said everything without saying a word. "Ma'am," Officer Briggs said slowly, "you're not being detained. But it might be best if you just left, to avoid any further disruption." Further disruption. Like Helena was the disruption. Like she was the storm, not the person standing in the middle of one. Helena looked at Officer Briggs directly. Her eyes didn't waver. "Am I being asked to leave because I committed a crime? Or because the manager doesn't like the color of my skin?" The question hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Officer Briggs opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Officer Dawson stepped forward. She looked Helena in the eyes and said, quietly but clearly enough for Craig to hear, "Ma'am, you haven't done anything wrong." Craig erupted. "Are you kidding me? Are you serious right now? She hasn't done anything wrong?" His voice broke into a higher register. The polished mask shattered into 1,000 pieces on the hardwood floor. "She's standing in my restaurant, refusing to leave, making a mockery of my business. And you're telling me she hasn't done anything wrong? What is the point of calling you people if you won't do a single thing? I want her out. Get her out of here, now!" His voice cracked on the last word. Spit flew from his lips. A woman at the nearest table flinched and pulled her chair back. The composure was gone. The performance was over. The mask had fallen completely, and underneath it was exactly what Helena had come here to find. A man who believed his authority was absolute, and who could not handle the moment that authority was questioned. Denise Calloway stood near the service station, half hidden behind a pillar. She had been recording on her phone since the moment Craig first raised his voice. The camera was tucked against a stack of menus, angled perfectly. She captured everything, every word, every gesture, every ugly second of it. Her hands were trembling, tears pooled in the corners of her eyes, but she didn't stop recording. She didn't lower the phone. She held it steady because something deep inside her told her that this moment mattered, that someone needed to see what happened here tonight. The dining room buzzed with tension thick enough to taste. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Others leaned forward, entertained, like they were watching reality television unfold live at their dinner table. A man at the bar pulled out his phone and started his own recording. A woman 2 tables away was texting furiously under the tablecloth, narrating the scene to someone who wasn't there. Nobody helped. Nobody intervened. The room had chosen its side, and Helena wasn't on it. Craig was pacing now, back and forth in front of the hostess podium. Short, sharp steps. His shoes clicked against the hardwood. Sweat glistened on his forehead. His tie was loosened. His collar was dark with moisture. He was losing control, and he knew it. The officers weren't following orders. Helena wasn't breaking. The room was watching him come apart at the seams. He stopped pacing. He turned back to Helena one last time. His voice dropped low, quiet, dangerous. The kind of quiet that comes right before something ugly. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think standing here with that little notebook makes you brave. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. People like you come and go every day, every single day. But I'll still be here tomorrow morning, running this place, making the decisions, sitting in my office. And you? You'll be back on whatever bus bench you crawled off of tonight." He smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. The smile of a man who believed with every fiber of his being that he had already won. Helena said nothing. She just looked at him. The same look she had given him from the very beginning. Patient, measuring, unhurried. Like she was watching a clock count down to 0 and he couldn't hear the ticking. Craig had no idea the clock was almost out. Outside, through the rain-streaked glass of the front window, headlights cut through the darkness. Bright, white, steady. A black SUV pulled up to the curb and stopped. The engine idled. The valet stepped forward, confused. He hadn't called for any car. Nobody had. The rear door opened. A polished leather shoe touched the wet pavement, and that was the moment everything changed. Oliver Preston stepped out of the SUV and buttoned his suit jacket in one smooth motion. Silver hair, tailored charcoal suit, a presence that made the valet step back without being asked. He walked through the front door like he owned the air inside the room. The hostess recognized him first. Her face went white. She had seen his photo in the corporate training manual. Every Crestwood employee had. Oliver Preston, Chief Operating Officer, the man who sat directly beneath the owner, the man who could close a location with a single phone call. Craig recognized him a half-second later. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened. His lips moved. But for a long, beautiful moment, no sound came out. "Mr. Preston," Craig finally managed. His voice was thin, stretched, like a wire about to snap. "Sir, what are you doing here?" Oliver didn't answer him. He didn't look at him. He walked right past Craig like the man was furniture, past the officers, past the hostess, past every staring face in the dining room. He walked directly to Helena. He stopped in front of her, and in a voice loud enough for every single person in that restaurant to hear, from the couple by the window to the bartender to the teenager who had been filming, he said 4 words. "Mrs. Norton, I'm sorry." The room didn't understand. Not yet. The words floated in the air like a foreign language. Mrs. Norton, sorry. What was happening? Why was the COO of the entire company apologizing to the woman in the rain jacket? Craig's mouth moved again. His brain was running calculations it couldn't solve. "Mrs. Norton?" he repeated. The name came out like a question he was terrified to hear the answer to. Oliver turned around. He faced Craig directly. His expression was flat, professional, but underneath that surface was something cold and absolute. The expression of a man about to deliver a verdict. "Craig, this is Helena Norton." He paused. Let the name fill the room. "She is the founder and sole owner of the Crestwood Dining Group. She owns this restaurant. She owns every one of our 32 locations. She built this company from nothing over 22 years. She owns the tables your guests are sitting at. She owns the kitchen your cooks are working in. She owns the floor you're standing on." Another pause. Longer this time. Heavy. "She owns the name tag on your chest." The dining room didn't gasp. It was worse than a gasp. It was a silence so deep and so complete that you could hear the ice shifting in a water glass 3 tables away. You could hear the rain tapping against the window. You could hear Craig Dutton's entire world cracking down the middle. Craig's knees buckled slightly, just enough to notice. His hand shot out and grabbed the edge of the hostess podium to steady himself. His face had gone from red to white to a shade of gray that looked like illness. His eyes were wide. His lips were trembling. That's not, I didn't." He couldn't finish a sentence. His brain was short-circuiting. Every insult he had thrown, every word, homeless trash, filthy, stinking, cardboard box, bus bench. He had said all of it, every syllable, to the woman who signed his paychecks. The woman at the nearby table who had been laughing earlier wasn't laughing anymore. Her hand was over her mouth, but this time it was genuine shock. The teenager lowered his phone slowly, his face pale. The man at the bar set his drink down and stared at the counter. The entire room was recalculating. Every smirk, every whisper, every turned shoulder, every person who had watched Helena be humiliated and done nothing. They were all replaying the last 30 minutes in their heads and realizing they were on the wrong side of history. Helena stepped forward, not toward Oliver, toward Craig. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her voice carried the weight of every motel room her mother ever cleaned, every mile her father ever drove, every dollar she ever saved in a shoebox under her bed, every night she ever spent alone at a folding table, building something from nothing. "Craig, in the last 30 minutes you called me homeless trash. You told me I stink. You said I crawled out of a dumpster. You told your staff to throw me out. You called the police on me. You told this entire room that I don't belong here." She took one more step closer, close enough that he had to look down to meet her eyes. "I built this company with these hands. I built it from a 1-bedroom apartment with $400 and my mother's recipes. I built every restaurant, I hired every regional manager. I approved every menu. I chose the paint color on these walls and the wood for these floors." Her voice didn't waver, not once. "And you stood here, in my house, looked me in my face, and told me I was trash." She let the silence hold for 3 full seconds, the longest 3 seconds of Craig Dutton's life. Then she said 2 words. Quiet, final, absolute. "You're done." Craig opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His hand was still gripping the podium. His knuckles were bone white. A thin line of sweat rolled down his temple and dripped onto his collar. Helena turned away from him. She looked at Oliver. "Handle it," she said, and Oliver Preston nodded once. Craig grabbed Oliver's sleeve, actually grabbed it, like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "Mr. Preston, please, I didn't know. I had no idea who she was. If I had known—" Oliver pulled his arm free, slowly, deliberately. He looked at the wrinkled fabric, then at Craig with the kind of calm disgust that is worse than any shouting. "If you had known," Oliver repeated. "So if she had been a regular homeless woman, no money, no power, no name, then what you did would have been acceptable?" Craig's mouth opened, closed. He had walked into a trap he built himself. "That's not what It's exactly what you meant, and that's the problem." Craig switched tactics. He turned to Helena, hands clasped like a man in prayer. "Mrs. Norton, please. I have a mortgage. I was just enforcing the dress code, that's all, I swear." Helena didn't turn around. Oliver answered for her. "There is no dress code that permits racial profiling. I wrote the handbook myself." He paused. "And the 3 customer complaints over the past 2 months, the ones you told regional management were fabricated? We investigated. They were real. Every single one." Craig's face crumpled. The last thread snapped. Oliver made a phone call. 30 seconds later, a man in a dark blazer walked through the front door. Crestwood Corporate Security. Calm, professional, built like someone who never needed to raise his voice. "Craig Dutton, your employment with the Crestwood Dining Group is terminated effective immediately. Hand over your keys, name tag, and access card. Security will escort you through the kitchen exit." Craig's hands shook as he unclipped his name tag. The pin caught on fabric. He fumbled with it for 5 seconds while the dining room watched. The small metallic click when it came free was the loudest sound in the building. He placed it on the podium, then his keys, then a plastic card. 3 objects. Everything he had in this place, gone in 15 seconds. The security officer placed a firm hand on Craig's shoulder. "This way, sir." Craig was walked through the dining room, past tables where guests refused to look at him, past the bar where the bartender found something fascinating at the bottom of a sink, through the kitchen where line cooks went silent and dishwashers stared. The smell of butter and garlic mixed with the sharp scent of humiliation. Out the back door, into the alley, into the rain. The door closed behind him with a heavy metal thud. Inside, Helena turned to the dining room. No speech, no lecture. "I apologize for the disruption. Please enjoy your meals. Everything tonight is on the house." One person clapped, then another. Not thunderous, something quieter, heavier. The sound of people who knew they had witnessed something they would never forget. The man who had been filming deleted his video. He set his phone face down and stared at his plate. Helena walked to Denise Calloway, still standing behind the pillar, tears streaming down her face. "What's your name?" "Denise. Denise Calloway." "How long have you been here?" 3 weeks. Helena placed her hand on the young woman's shoulder, gently. "You were brave tonight. We'll talk soon." Then she turned to the officers. She addressed Officer Dawson first. "Thank you for your honesty. It mattered." Officer Dawson nodded. Her eyes glistened. Helena turned to Officer Briggs, calm, direct. "Officer, I'd encourage your department to think about calls like this. A man called you because a black woman asked for a table. That's not a crime. That's a Tuesday." Officer Briggs nodded once and walked out. Officer Dawson followed. Helena watched them leave. Then she walked to the bar, pulled out a stool, and sat down. I'll have the pan-seared salmon and a glass of water. The bartender almost tripped over himself pouring it. Denise Calloway posted the video at 6 the next morning. She didn't add a caption. She didn't need one. The footage spoke for itself. 4 minutes and 38 seconds of Craig Dutton calling a black woman homeless trash, threatening to have her dragged out, screaming at police officers, and then the beautiful, devastating moment, when Oliver Preston walked through the door and said, "Mrs. Norton, I'm sorry." By noon, the video had 500,000 views. By 6 that evening, it had crossed 2 million. By the next morning, 4.2 million people had watched Craig Dutton destroy his own life in under 5 minutes. The comments section exploded. Thousands of reactions per hour. People sharing the video with one-word captions. Watch! Karma! Justice! The clip was reposted across every platform. It trended #1 on X in the United States for 14 straight hours. Instagram Reels chopped it into 30-second highlights. TikTok creators stitched it with their own reactions. Jaws dropping, hands covering mouths, people literally standing up from their chairs. The phrase, "She owns the floor you're standing on," became a meme overnight. People printed it on t-shirts. They put it in their bios. They used it as a response to every bully, every bigot, every person who ever underestimated someone based on how they looked. Then the media arrived. CNN ran the story during prime time. The anchor called it a masterclass in why you should never judge a book by its cover. Local Atlanta affiliates sent crews to the restaurant. The Root published a long-form piece titled, "Helena Norton Built an Empire in Silence, Then Let It Speak for Her." BET covered it during their evening broadcast. But it was Brenda Whitfield who dug deeper than anyone else. Brenda was an investigative reporter for Atlanta's largest news station. She had a reputation for pulling threads that other journalists ignored. When she saw the video, she didn't just cover the incident. She started asking questions about Craig Dutton himself. Where had he worked before Crestwood? Why did he leave? Were there other complaints? The answers came fast. Brenda discovered that Craig had worked at an upscale steakhouse in Savannah before joining Crestwood. He left that job suddenly 18 months ago. The official story was mutual separation. The real story was uglier. 3 black customers had filed formal complaints against him during his time there. One said Craig refused to seat her family and told them the restaurant was full, while 3 empty tables sat in clear view. Another said Craig made a comment about keeping the dining room presentable while looking directly at a black couple. The steakhouse settled quietly. No public statement. No record in Craig's employment file. They let him walk away clean, and he carried that clean record straight to Crestwood. Brenda's report aired on a Tuesday evening. She stood outside the Crestwood flagship with the camera rolling and laid out every detail. The previous complaints, the quiet settlement, the pattern of behavior that stretched back years. She interviewed 2 former employees from the Savannah Steakhouse, both black women, who described a hostile work environment where Craig's behavior was an open secret. One of them looked directly into the camera and said, "Everybody knew. Management knew. They just didn't care because the numbers were good." Inside Crestwood, the investigation went even deeper. Oliver Preston and the corporate team pulled 6 months of records from the Atlanta location. What they found turned their stomachs. Craig had been systematically burying complaints from customers of color. Negative comment cards from Black and Latino diners were removed before monthly reports were compiled. Online reviews mentioning racial bias were flagged and responded to with generic apologies, but never escalated. 2 former employees came forward internally, both black women who had worked under Craig during his first 3 months. One said Craig told her she needed to fix her attitude after she politely corrected a billing error. The other said Craig cut her hours without explanation after she reported a racist comment from a coworker. Both women eventually quit. Neither filed formal complaints because they didn't believe anyone would listen. Helena read every finding, every email, every buried comment card. She sat at her kitchen table at 5:30 in the morning with her coffee growing cold beside her tablet, reading the details of what had happened inside her own company while she wasn't looking. She released a public statement the same day. "If this was happening under my roof, I want to know, and I want it fixed. No employee and no customer should ever feel unsafe, unwelcome, or devalued in any Crestwood restaurant. The fact that this happened at all is a failure, and it starts with me." The legal consequences followed swiftly. The two former employees from the Atlanta location filed a joint civil lawsuit against Craig Dutton, alleging racial discrimination and a hostile work environment. Their attorney held a press conference on the courthouse steps, standing between two women who had been silenced for months and were now finally being heard. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission opened a formal investigation based on the complaints from both the Atlanta and Savannah locations. Within weeks, they issued a finding of probable cause, meaning there was sufficient evidence to believe Craig had engaged in a pattern of racial discrimination. The Georgia Attorney General's office opened its own preliminary inquiry into whether Craig's conduct constituted a civil rights violation under state law. Legal analysts on cable news debated the case for days. The consensus was clear. Craig Dutton's behavior wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, and patterns have consequences. Craig's attorney released a statement calling the incident an unfortunate misunderstanding and asking the public to allow the legal process to work. Nobody bought it. The internet had already seen the video. There was no misunderstanding. There was only a man who believed he had the right to decide who was human and who wasn't, and got caught. Craig Dutton's career in hospitality was over. His social media accounts were deleted within 48 hours of the video going viral. His LinkedIn profile disappeared. A former colleague told Brenda Whitfield in an on-camera interview, "Everyone in the industry knows his name now, and not in a good way. Nobody will touch him. He's finished." The civil lawsuit moved toward mediation. The EEOC investigation continued. A consent decree was being negotiated that would require Craig to complete extensive anti-discrimination training and perform community service. But the real sentence had already been handed down by 4.2 million people who watched a man destroy himself in his own dining room, and by a woman in a rain jacket who let him. 6 months later, the Crestwood Dining Group looked like a different company. Not from the outside. The restaurant still had the same brick walls, the same brass fixtures, the same jazz playlists drifting through warm dining rooms. The salmon was still pan-seared to perfection. The collard greens still tasted like somebody's grandmother made them. The difference was on the inside. Helena Norton implemented changes across all 32 locations. Mandatory bias training, not a corporate slideshow, but real workshops designed and led by an external civil rights organization. 2 full days. Every employee. No exceptions. She created an anonymous reporting hotline. Any staff member could report discrimination, harassment, or retaliation without giving their name. Every call was reviewed by an independent team that reported directly to Helena. Not to regional managers, not to supervisors, to her. She established a $500,000 scholarship fund for hospitality workers from underrepresented communities. She named it after her mother, the woman who cleaned 12 motel rooms a day so her 6 children could eat. The first class included 14 young people from across Georgia and Tennessee. The Atlanta flagship reopened under a new general manager, a black woman named Tara Simmons, who had been with Crestwood for 8 years. She had applied for the GM position 9 months earlier. She was more qualified than Craig in every measurable way. She was passed over because Craig's college buddy made a phone call. She got the job now. Not as consolation, because she earned it. Denise Calloway completed the management training program in 11 months, 3 months ahead of schedule. She became the youngest assistant general manager in company history at 23. On her first day, she pinned her name tag to her blazer and stood at the hostess podium. A woman walked in that evening, older, tired-looking, worn shoes. No reservation. Denise smiled. "Welcome to Crestwood. Let me find you a table." Helena went back to her routine. 5:30 mornings, pour over coffee, business news on her tablet. She still visited restaurants unannounced, still wore plain clothes, still watched how people were treated. She added one new habit. Every new employee now received a handwritten note in their welcome packet. Same 6 words every time. Helena's handwriting. If you see it, say it. She never did another interview. The story had been told. She went back to being invisible, exactly where she wanted to be. Craig Dutton moved out of Atlanta 2 months after the incident. He took a job managing a food court in a strip mall in another state. The consent decree followed him. The internet followed him. His name would live in search results forever, attached to a video that millions watched and shared. He never spoke publicly about what happened. It wasn't one bad night. It was years of quiet cruelty, buried complaints, silenced employees, turned backs. The video didn't create who Craig was. It just showed everybody. Helena knew that better than anyone. She had lived on the other side of that cruelty her entire life. She knew what it felt like to build something extraordinary and still have people look at you like you were nothing. That's why she didn't announce herself that night. She wanted the truth. And the truth was ugly. But ugly truths are the only ones worth knowing, because they're the only ones you can fix. So let me leave you with this. If you were sitting in that restaurant, 2 tables away, watching Craig say those things, would you have stood up? Would you have said something? Or would you have looked down at your plate and waited for it to pass? Be honest with yourself. And if you've ever been the one standing at that door, told you don't belong somewhere you had every right to be, put your story in the comments. Because someone watching this right now needs to hear it. If this one hit you, smash that like button. Share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe if you haven't. Come back, because we've got more stories to tell. But remember this. The real power isn't in owning the restaurant. The real power is knowing your worth, even when the entire room is trying to convince you that you have none.
Craig lost his job, his career, his name. Helena went home, woke up at 5:30 the next morning, made her coffee, and went back to work, same as always. But here's what this story made me realize. 400 people sat in that room. They heard every word Craig said. They watched a woman get cold trash to her face, and not one of them opened their mouth. Some laughed, some filmed, most just looked at their place. And that's the uncomfortable truth. We love watching justice happen in a video. We cheer when the villain gets caught, but the real test isn't what you do after the truth comes out. It's what you do before. When the woman in the rain jacket is just a woman in a rain jacket. When there's no twist coming. When standing up might cost you something. Your comfort, your dinner, your place in the room. That's when it counts. And 400 people failed that test. I'm not asking what you have done after Oliver walked in. I'm asking what would you have done before, when it was just a woman being humiliated and nobody knew who she was. Be honest. Tell me in the comments if this hit you. Like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell. We tell this story every week. Justice shouldn't need a plot twist. It should just need one person brave enough to speak up. Remember that.